Hello, welcome to the Saving with Steve show, where we talk about the ins and outs of money. Pretty much everything under the sun relates to you having a happier, healthier relationship with money. My name is Steve Sexton. I want to thank you for joining us today. Hey, you know what? You can always go to viewers at savingwithsteve.us if you have a topic that you would like us to go through. Now, we've had a number of requests through this tax season of how to avoid tax fraud. And you know what? We're going to be talking about that today. We also have a very special guest. We have Ismat Mangla from MagnifyMoney. What a wonderful journal she is. You know what? One of the reports that came out, it says half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, according to their survey. And you know what? They really have no money left after they pay the bills. The reality is, in fact, 67% of people wouldn't be able to pay their bills if they didn't get their next paycheck. The number one bills are housing, mortgage. You know what? The reality here is we had a lot to unpack today. And Ismat's going to be here. She's going to help us get through it all. And with that, I want to, talk to you about how to avoid tax fraud first. The reality is each year, taxpayers' personal information is compromised through phishing scams by unscrupulous tax preparers. You know what? The reality is we're full blown in the tax season. People are running at breakneck speeds to get their documents to their tax preparer, paying them the least amount of money to the IRS and getting the largest refund. Okay. If you go to the IRS website at irs.gov and look at tax scams, you're going to see their investigation group is going to come out with some additional information on top of what I have for you. So to avoid tax scams or tax season frauds, hey, here we go. First of all, choose your taxpayer wisely. Look for preparers available year round. Year round says they have a consistent business, not a pop-up shop. Ask your tax preparer for an IRS preparer's tax ID number. All paid preparers are required to have one. Don't use a ghost preparer. They won't sign a tax return. They prepare for you. Also, don't fall victim to taxpayers' promises of large refunds. Taxpayers must pay their fair share of taxes. Don't sign a blank tax return. Taxpayers are ultimately responsible for what appears on a tax return filed with the IRS. Now, I want to be really clear about this. And the reason why I want to be really clear about it is there's a lot of pop-up shops where you have ghost tax preparers that says, I'm going to get you the largest refund. In fact, they're going to charge you a percentage of that refund for their doing the IRS tax return for you. The problem is they're not going to sign the tax return. You're going to get a notice in 3 years saying you owe a bunch of money, and they're not going to be around to find you or to find them to get your money back. So the reality is stay away from them. Make sure you receive your refund. Your refund should be deposited in your bank account, not the taxpayers. Do never respond to text messages, emails, social media posts claiming to be the IRS. They may contain malware or other viruses that could compromise your personal information. In fact, that's what they're designed to do. Don't click links or other attachments, unsolicited emails or text messages about your tax return. These messages are fraudulent. Okay. Check your personal and financial information. Never provide this information in response to an unsolicited text, email, social media post claiming to be the IRS. In fact, the IRS only mails you stuff. They don't call you. There's a taxpayers advocacy board. You know what? The only way they would call you if you called them first, because you have to initiate the contact. You know what? If you'd like more tips, you can always go visit the IRS at irs.gov. If you suspect tax violations by a person or a business, you could use Form 3949A. It's an informational referral. If you're, if you want to report phishing emails, go to phishing@irs.gov. You know what? And you can also go to or IRS impersonation scams to tigta.gov. That's tigta.gov. You know what? Tax season is over on April 18th, and a lot of people are moving fast. So take care of yourself. Make sure you do the right thing and don't get taken by tax fraud. You know what? I want you to stick with us. We're going to be right back. We're going to be talking to Ismat. Cameron, you're going to have to edit that out. We're going to be talking to Ismat Mangla from MagnifyMoney. Stick with us. We're going to be right back. Hey, Cameron, that was just a conclusion of the first segment. Hey, you know what? Welcome back to the Saving with Steve show, where we talk about the ins and outs of money. Again, hey, look, I truly want to thank you all for tuning in and letting your friends and family and associates know about the show. All the replays are available at savingwithsteve.us. If you're enjoying the stories of helpful information and insight on Saving with Steve, then I encourage you to subscribe to Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and many others. You know what? Check out a few of our affiliates at UK Health Radio, BBS Radio, Talk Radio in New York City. All these networks are dedicated to empowering you to solve problems, uplift your spirit, and live a life of personal and financial freedom. You know what? I'm really excited today. We're going to be talking with Ismat Mangla from MagnifyMoney. I know I got that right. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what? There's this interesting survey that went about. And the results of the survey shows that, half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And it means that people have no money left over after the expenses are paid. And we have Ismat here to just kind of help us unpack what's going on with the survey. And we're going to be talking about what people can do to put themselves in a better situation. So Ismat, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, I really appreciate you being here because this is a big issue because we're talking about half the United States. And you know what? And one of the other things that came from the survey is that 67% of people said, hey, you know what? I can't pay my bills unless I get my next paycheck. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, that is scary. I have been covering personal finance and money for a long time as a journalist, and now I'm at MagnifyMoney. And despite that, this kind of information still shocks me a little bit. Because like you said, our survey found that half of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. But what was really interesting about that is, yes, that's common among people who are, making less than like $35,000 a year, say. But even a third of everyone who's making $100,000 or more say they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that's pretty shocking to me because, if you're making six figures, you're pretty comfortably in the upper income spectrum in the US. And you would think that would allow you to sort of save a little bit more. What else we found was, like you said, about 2/3 of folks we surveyed said they wouldn't be able to pay their bills if they didn't receive their next paycheck. Of course, Gen Zers, who are sort of the youngest generation in the working world right now, we're kind of at the higher end of that spectrum, as well as women, though. I think it's about 72% of women said that.
Wow.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I said, wow.
Yeah, a little depressing, especially if you're a woman. And then we also found, and related to that, we found that men could go about twice as long without a paycheck as women could. I think the average was 13 weeks versus 7 weeks for men or for women.
So what's the reason for what's behind that? I mean, does men save more than women? I mean, most of the ladies I knew or grew up with had a lot more money than most of the guys.
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of other surveys and research at Magnify too, just looking at sort of the gender pay gap and things like that. And I mean, we found that there is still a pretty big disparity in terms of how much women make and how much men make. We did another survey a couple weeks back where we found that I think at least 75% of all jobs that were six figures or more go to men. So there's still a big disparity there. And I think that women are, we aren't quite at parity yet with men. Mm-hmm. But a major contributing factor too to that was that about 61% of women don't have 3 months worth of living expenses saved, compared with about 45% of men. And, we've always talked about the importance of having an emergency fund saved over for, a catastrophic event where you might not have your paycheck. But a lot of Americans don't have that either. And our survey reflected that as well, because 71% of the folks we surveyed said that they're worried that they don't have enough money saved for emergencies. So it was kind of a dire picture. I'm not going to lie. It tells us that there's some work to do.
Oh yeah. Well, it also says, hey, if you extrapolate that out to the ability for people to retire, that makes it tougher and tougher to retire down the road, especially when they're looking at potential for higher taxes and things like that. So that's very, very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't, retirement is a whole nother topic we could talk about, right? We have done studies and surveys on that subject too, and Americans are unfortunately woefully underprepared for retirement, and a lot of folks will have to work well into their sort of golden years just to get by, and that's kind of scary as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting. So, when we, when you really think about this, you say, okay, so what can people do
Mhm.
in order to better their situation
Yeah.
and to put themselves in a position where they're not really living paycheck to paycheck? Because, a lot of what this really says is most people don't have an emergency fund. So they're either going to be putting it on debt, or,
Mhm.
it could put them in the homeless center. And we obviously want to avoid that.
Yeah.
So, from what your studies show, what can people do? What can people start working with?
Well, it's funny that you bring up housing, because that is the biggest, expense that people are worried about. They won't be able to pay their mortgage or their rent if they lose their job or miss a paycheck. And that's pretty scary. I would say that I think this does underscore the need for Americans to beef up some kind of emergency savings fund. As a money journalist, we've always recommended at least 3 months. Sometimes that number is 6 months worth of expenses. Sometimes people say a year. I like to say, don't focus on the end number right away, because if you're at zero, thinking, oh, 6 months worth of expenses, I can barely make ends meet for this month, that's going to be really daunting. So I like to say, take it small and just try to get yourself up to 2 weeks, 1 month worth of expenses, and celebrate those big wins. Not by buying something, but celebrate that you are able to do that. And I think there's a lot of ways that Americans can do that. And I think, the part about the survey where we found about a third of folks making 100,000 or more were living paycheck to paycheck. That tells me that, and yes, things are more expensive now. Inflation is a real thing, but that does tell me that maybe some Americans are getting caught up in what I like to call lifestyle creep.
Mhm.
That thing where we get a little bit more money or make a little bit more money, but then we spend a lot more too. And that can really eat away at our savings, and it can eat away at our just our financial health and wealth building in general, right? We're talking about retirement. That's a great example of how you might not reach your retirement goals if you're not careful. So I always like to tell people, especially at the higher end of the income, to start by looking at lifestyle creep. Where are some areas where you're spending, where you can probably cut back and it's really not going to hurt that much? Or are there ways that you are spending more than you can or should, just because maybe your neighbors do it or your friends do it? And, that's a real thing. So I'm victim to it,
Oh,
I've
I
definitely
think
done that
everybody is.
myself. Yeah. Yeah.
I was an interesting comment. We've all heard of the actor Jim Carrey.
Hmm.
And he said, what, many people will not take the time to live under their means to be in a position where they don't have to worry about money again. And I think a lot of people, like you said, the lifestyle creep is a big thing, and credit card debt and all that builds up and builds up and builds up, and instead of earning an interest, they're paying an interest, and it just grinds away at their savings and their assets and so on. So I
Absolutely.
think it's
But I don't want to say that's, there's definitely folks who are not making that much money, and
Mhm.
they are also struggling, and it's a different kind of struggle, right? So I want to make sure we're cognizant of that.
Oh
I
yeah.
do think there are some structural issues as well. I mean, I personally think that a higher minimum wage would go a long way to help some of these things as well. But so I do think there's structural issues. That said, I feel like there's something that everybody can do to put themselves in a better, financial position.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk further about those.
So perfect. You know what? Guess this is the perfect time to take a break. And then we're going to talk about all the things that people can do to help better their situation. So look, everybody stick with us. We'll be right back with more Ismat Mangla here at Magnify Money. So stick with us right back. We'll be right back here with some more Saving with Steve. Perfect. Cameron, that finished the second segment of the show. We'll be moving into the third segment with Ismat Mangla here at Magnify Money. So with that, in about 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. Hello, welcome back to the Saving with Steve show. Hey, we're talking with Ismat Mangla here at Magnify Money. We're talking about all the things people can do to, one, start with the basics is, hey, let's build an emergency fund. Let's reduce the expenses that we have. How can we do that? In many cases, how can we do that with still doing the same stuff we're doing now? And put ourselves in a position where we can start saving some money. So with that, Ismat, welcome back to the show. I know you're on for the second segment. I just said welcome back twice, but hey, we're glad to have you.
Well, I'll say that I'm glad to be back twice. Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said about starting first with setting up an emergency fund, that is probably, the number one thing that folks can do, so that they're not in that position where they're living paycheck to paycheck. And by the way, that can also have a lot of great effects on the rest of your life, because money is a big stressor. And when you're always worried that you're not going to have enough to pay next month's bills, that affects your health, that affects the way you sleep. So if you have a little bit of an emergency fund cushion, then that's going to lift the quality of your life, I think.
So let's break down a little bit of mechanics. What would be the great first step for somebody who's looking to do a better job managing their money, finding ways where they can reduce and eliminate some expenses? What would be a great first step?
I think that the first step should be automation, because as human beings, we're not great at resisting temptation or having willpower, right? Like, it's just, why set yourself up for that, right? And a lot of behavioral economics research shows that if you can automate your savings, you're going to be so much more successful. And but what I mean by that is, all right, you get your paycheck. It goes into your checking account, and then you're like, okay, I got all this money, I'm going to pay like all my bills. And then, oh, I got some money here, I'm going to go to the movies and, buy a new dress. But before that money even hits your checking account, set up a high yield savings account of some kind. They're a dime a dozen now. You can find them, online everywhere. And if your employer allows you to do this, have a certain amount of your paycheck automatically directed to that savings account, first and foremost. All right. If your employer doesn't do it, there are ways to set it up so that it automatically goes from your checking to your savings. But I like the one where it goes directly to your savings account, because that means you don't see it. And then you don't look at that savings account regularly, right? Like, you're looking at the checking, that's the money you have to play with and do what you need to do. So if you don't see it, you're not going to spend it. And research bears that out. I mean, it's kind of like when I have a carton of cookies and cream ice cream in my freezer. I'm thinking about it when I'm on the couch, but if I don't have it there, I'm not going to eat it, right? So it's kind of the same
you just
thing.
really, you sure there's not like some psychological thing that just hits you in the head and says cookies and cream don't get me?
Yeah, I mean, I'll think about it, but then, that would mean I have to get out and go to the store and get it, so there's extra, the point is that there's extra steps involved there, right? So I'm a really big fan of automation, and people are thinking, well, I can only just pay my bills. Like, how you expect me to direct a part of my check to the savings? Doesn't have to be a lot, Steve. Like, I would just start with a very small amount, whatever you can bear, even if it's $10, $50, $100, whatever makes sense for you and your budget, start with that. Because you'll realize that, like, oh, once I have this much to work with, you'll start making adjustments. So I think that's the biggest thing you can do to set yourself up for saving success.
I have a great little story. One of the people that I had talked to that I met working at a charity, their first step was actually to stop using debits or credit cards to pay things. They brought cash everywhere. And whatever
That's-
leftover change or cash they had, they put it in a jar. And at the end of the month, they took it to the bank and put it in their savings account. They first
you know what? There's research that backs that up.
yeah. And you know what? The reality is the first month he goes, yeah, I saved $25. You know, he was actually embarrassed to say that. I go, yeah, but you saved money. Did you save money before? He goes, no. And after 3 months, he actually ended up saving $125 and he built up. I've also talked to other people who have automated the set it and forget it program with the savings. And you know what? They realized the impact of what they were doing 6 months down the road when they had the car emergency and they basically ran over a bunch of nails and they had to replace their tires. You know what? $500, but they had it as opposed to putting it on a credit card. Now, with that
which
same
will lead you to more debt, right?
Oh yeah.
You'll pay
And
interest.
and then what that same person also did is they said, you know what, we want to travel. So once they got their savings set up, they put a travel budget in there and say, I want to go here. And they planned, hey, 8 months from now, I want to be able to save the money to go here. But you know what? That trip was only $1,000. So they're talking $70, $80 a month. So all they had to do is figure out a way to reduce their expenses by that much, or do things differently so they can get that money to go travel. So it was really interesting. I love that automation piece. And I just wanted to say that because people can do a lot by setting it and forgetting it.
And it feels so good when you do check in on it. I don't recommend checking in on it like every day, right? But like when you do check in on it and that pile has grown, oh my gosh, that feeling, it can't be beat. And it's funny you brought the cash thing up because there's also research that shows, and I'm kind of split on this, but there is research that shows that if you spend with cash rather than debit or credit cards, you'll spend less because you physically feel the pain of separating with your money than you do with cards. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. A lot of people like using credit cards. I always say if you like using credit cards and can use them responsibly and take advantage of them, that's fine. I'm one of those people. But there's nothing like that pain of parting with cash to make you be like, oh, do I really want to spend this money, right? So yeah, I definitely love that tip.
Yeah. And you know what, let's talk about, you know what, specific things people can do in their everyday lives where they can, hey, how can I do this for less?
Yeah. I think that the next step that everyone should take is you don't know how you're going to get somewhere if you don't know where you are, right? So you've got to take stock of what your situation looks like first. A lot of us don't like to do that. We like to stick our head in the sand and just, whatever. But it's really important to get a really clear picture of your finances. What's coming in every month, do a tally of that. And on the other side of the paper, or, there's a lot of, tools like mint.com that you can use. Look at what's going out, like list all of the expenses that, are fixed, your housing, your rent, your grocery bill, all of that stuff. And then list that out. And it's surprising how you'll find things like, oh, I'm spending $15 on this gym membership every month and I'm not really going, or I didn't realize that I'm spending so much on that Netflix subscription, or all of my streaming subscriptions. You really have to take stock, because once you take stock, that's going to tell you, oh, maybe there's some pockets here where I can cut back. Maybe my grocery bill is too high because I'm not, buying sort of optimally. I was reading recently that, with inflation, price of beef has really gone up. And chicken has not gone up as much. So maybe that's an opportunity to direct some of your grocery budget that way, rather than getting the steak for a while or something, and then the price of things like canned tuna is about the same. So there's ways to adjust, your bills that way.
One of the other ways that I've seen people save money is, my wife and I used to be the fan of the packaged salads, and they're $4 a piece. So if you do one every single night, every single day of the month, you're looking at $120. But if you buy your romaine lettuce or your spinach, your nuts, your salad dressing, your cheeses or whatever, you can actually do it for less than a third of that.
100%. And I've noticed that in so many things. I will say people are like, well, you know what? If I don't buy the packaged salad, then I'm not going to eat salad because I don't have time when I get home from work to wash the lettuce and do all of that. And to that, I say, that's fine. There are going to be things where you're willing to spend a little bit extra for that convenience. But there's probably other areas where you can cut back, right? So it's really identifying what that thing is for you. I hate it when people say, oh, stop buying that coffee every day, and that's going to be like lead you to the path to like financial success. But I say not necessarily, right? You have to figure out what expenses are the ones that are really making your life better, are bringing you true joy. And if that cup of coffee is doing that for you, then that's the one where you can probably hang on to it, right? But if there's things where you're just spending mindlessly, where it's not enhancing your life, those are the areas where you can probably cut back in a way that makes sense for you.
I agree. I've talked to people on both ends. One with the old Starbucks routine at, $4 a cup of coffee per day, all that kind of stuff. And it's just more of a ritual.
Yeah.
And I've also seen people consistently eat out. And I mean, like almost on a daily basis, you're like talking $800-900 a month. They don't realize it's almost $11,000-12,000 a year for eating out. And if they were just to take their lunch, 3 or 4 days a week, the difference would be almost $5,000 a year. And when people start realizing that, yeah, I might be able to do something different, or even looking at analyzing your auto insurance, your home insurance, your cell phone bill. You talked about the cable bill. My wife and I saved $100 a month just by going to internet and streaming channels. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option. I am a big fan of, first of all, calling any provider that you have where you have like a monthly relationship and asking for a better rate or a better deal. What's the worst that they can say? No, like you might not get it, but you might save a little bit of money. I've done that a number of times with cable companies, sometimes with success and sometimes with not as much success. But I never regretted the like 10 minutes I spent on the phone doing it because again, because it's those recurring expenses. If you can shrink those a little bit, then that's going to pay dividends all year long. Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to think about the mindless spending, because like you said, the coffee, that might be a ritual every day. But yeah, I used to spend $12-13 on lunch every day. And like, when I reflect back on it, it didn't add anything to my life. It doesn't kill me to like make a little bit of a salad every night. And that, like you said, saves me thousands of dollars a year. So
yeah. So the reality is, I like the things that we're talking about because it might be $20 a month. It might be $40 a month. It might be 10, it might be 5, but all of it adds up. And once you get that emergency fund, hey, you know what? You don't have to dip into a credit card, or you're not as stressed. And then after that, hey, once I've got that, how do I create a savings for something that's important to me, like travel, retirement, all those type of things. So when the next time the statistic comes out, we would love to see it be at 42, just because people listen to what we had to say, and keep having that. Half Americans became 40% or 30%. So we would love to see that. I would love
to see that number shrink a little bit for sure. And I think that the pandemic has certainly led people to evaluate how they do things in a lot of different areas of their life. And I think that people are getting smarter about money in a lot of ways. Because a lot of tragedy too, right? Like people have lost their jobs or healthcare costs, things like that. But hopefully there's a silver lining there too.
Hopefully. So here's the thing. I'd like for people, because I know if people go to Magnified Money, they can get a lot of their financial information and education. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to have to come to the end of our segment.
Sure. MagnifyMoney.com is a website by LendingTree, and I would encourage everyone to go to both sites, MagnifyMoney and LendingTree.com, to get all of your personal finance questions answered on a variety of topics, and also a great place to compare rates when you're looking for that best deal on a credit card or an auto loan or a mortgage. So yeah, check us out.
Ismat Mangla, Magnify Money, thank you for joining us. Those pearls of wisdom will make a difference in many people's lives. So I want to thank you for imparting that today. I wish you well in the future. And you know what? We'd like to have you back sometime to talk about other topics. So I hope you're open to that. I'd love
to be back. Yeah, I would love to.
Beautiful. Well, look, stick with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back, but we're going to be right back next week. By the way, next week we have Michael Keat. He's the author of the book, money mindfulness. And we're going to be talking to him about his book. I want to thank Ismat Mangla for being here again. Hey, check out how to avoid tax scams. It's a big topic because nobody wants to have their information taken away or their money taken away. So with that, I'll look forward to seeing you all next week on Saving with Steve. Stay safe, healthy. Bye-bye.